Okay. So what John talked about was sort of how you do research in an association setting, the do's and the don'ts. And what I'm going to focus on for the next 10 or 15 minutes is the evolution of data and survey research. I've seen this a lot in corporations and what's going on right now in the association space. This is actually me 15 years ago. The old way was, let's do a survey, membership needs, or we want to talk to millennials, so we need some focus groups. You get it from up on high, you do the survey or focus groups or what have you, and then you do the report. The newer model, and frankly this is happening all the time in corporations and with some associations, is first you see what's out there, right? So let's go back to millennials. We want to figure out whether millennials will join or stay with our association. What is out there first that we can learn before we go ahead and do a study? And then take that information and lever it to do a survey or focus groups or what have you. And when I say go ahead and take a look at the data, there's sort of two different types of data streams, and that's the way I like to talk about it. A lot of people say big data, like these ones and zeros out in the ether, and that's not what I'm talking about. There's just lots of different pools or streams of information out there that we can all access to understand things prior to doing a survey. So for example, there's some stuff which is known as structured data, i.e. what's in the database, or exit surveys, what have you. What can we learn from that information before we go ahead and do a study? There's also what's known as unstructured data, such as social media stuff that's going on in online communities. What can we learn? What can we tap into prior to doing a survey? And why is this important? First and foremost, to save time. There's a lot of information out there that you can immediately access to learn some things. And secondarily, oftentimes a survey is much better, much more robust, because you've already done your due diligence ahead of time and learned a whole bunch of information. So if this is the model, sort of what does that mean for associations? Then I'll get to the next slide, is that you kind of need to think about restructuring how you do research and how you think about doing more strategic surveys. You need to get all the information out there sort of in a centralized location, and from there be able to survey your members or your possible members or what have you. However, what we've learned, and I've been doing this now for 4 or 5 years, is it's not so easy. That the idea of building a platform of data, all those data streams that you can then access, is quite hard. There's a lot of sort of internal databases that are home built that are, let's say, 40 years old. You need that in order to do some of this stuff. There's, oftentimes there's 4 or 5 different, frankly, just databases that are collected from different siloed groups inside of an association. And again, that information must be sort of pulled together. Also, we talked about declining survey response rates and general sort of incomplete information. What does that mean? I.e., you go into these databases, and we're often at times asked to assess things, and you see a pool of, let's say, 15,000 people with 60 variables. 50 of those 60 variables are often empty. Right? So you know, name and gender, when they started, maybe sort of what they pay a couple different times, but oftentimes there's lots of empty variable sets. And again, most importantly, oftentimes when we go in, there's no central location where all this information exists. There might be one CRM guy, there's 3 people working in sort of insights, there's a survey research expert. Membership has their own piece of information. You might do some publications. Publications have their own set of information. All this information ideally should be centralized so you can access it prior to doing surveys. If you can do that, you get to what's a great space. And so what we've done for ACS as well as some other clients, and again, all of our clients are sort of in different stages right now with regards to thinking about this in the research world. First, how do you integrate the data, right? And this can take up to 2 years, right? It really can take that long to wrangle all the information together to get it into a simple place. And once you have that, you can learn so much information about the sort of the how many questions, how many real members do we have, how much have they spent. We begin to do customer life cycle information that's actually meaningful and have that by database information. Then the second step is you can then begin to survey these folks, provided that you write the correct confidential information ahead of time. You can start to understand a little bit about the whys of your memberships. If you have 100,000 members, you suddenly have all the correct demographic information, then you can learn sort of what motivates them to be a member, what motivates them to stay a member. Then eventually you can get to a data visualization place inside the same system where you can push out information to relevant audiences, push out information to C-suite on how the customer sat information is coming along, or certain membership development types of information. You push information to, let's say, publication with regards to some of the surveys they do. All this stuff can be pushed out through a centralized system. Then finally, you can do pretty good and interesting sort of analytics and predictive modeling with respect to your members in your association. And this entire data life cycle is where everybody needs to be. And again, this gets back to a lot of what Jon was talking about, which is basically without something like this, you're going to have to be doing surveys over and over and over again that are going to have issues with validity, with regards to, are they actionable? You'll be repeating surveys. We go into associations sometimes. 4 different groups will have done the same survey over the last 3 years because there isn't a central repository for this types of information. It sort of drives Jon nuts. So again, the biggest challenges that we see with regards to this entire data life cycle are sort of twofold. The first are basically the people. You have a lot of information in some of the larger associations that's very, very siloed. And you sort of oftentimes you need a champion to go in there and say, hey, we all need to share the information. It's for the entire good of the association. And that can be quite a struggle because there's certain people that have their little fiefdoms, right? They don't want to share their information. They've spent 10 years building it. And again, that information comes into a central database. You can do a lot more with it. Then the other thing that we talk about often, frankly, is we go back to this data life cycle. And stage 2, 3, and 4, that's the really sexy stuff. You're starting to sort of show what you're doing. You're doing these really cool surveys that are different, pricing models, conjoints. You visualize it, you push it out to various people, you do cool analytics. All that stuff's the fun stuff. That's why I'm sort of a survey researcher. That's why I love data. Unfortunately, this is the big piece, the data integration piece. That it can take quite a while, but it's absolutely critical in order to get to where you need to be. We actually sometimes joke and talk about it, sort of our data janitorial services. Right? We'll go in there and clean up your data for you. And a lot of times we'll come on after, let's say, a Salesforce that wants to do integration. And they have some amazing products, but you go and say, hey, help me with the data and get this all together, and they say, no, it's not our job. Right? So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll come in and sort of help do this data janitorial stuff so everything is centrally located so you can, again, begin to do the things that you need to do in this new world, in this new dynamic. So again, you start to be able to build out dashboards that are relevant, do KPIs that are meaningful. Importantly, your surveys are much shorter. So you know the gender, you know the age, you've asked the people sort of what they think of the organization, so you don't have to re-ask sort of satisfaction stuff. You know how much they pay. So you have this, you can do a 5-minute survey, right? But you add it to all the different database information, and you can model and look at all types of fantastic stuff. The crosstabs can go on and on and on and on for just a simple 5-minute survey. And think about also just doing exit surveys with regards to conferences. You layer that into that information as well. You can learn a lot about the individual, right? And then from there, sort of the segmentation that we're doing now for Jon's group is much better than what you typically get. A lot of times people do database segmentation, and it's very much sort of around sort of gender and sort of how long they've been an association member. That's typically what a segmentation will look like. The segmentations that we're sort of doing now are much more needs-based. Rather than who they are, it's what they want. And so then you can begin to target them. You can start to do much better information as far as pushing out various materials that are actually relevant to the individual. So I'm going to stop there and let Jon talk a bit about exactly what we've done for ACS, because it's his as much his baby as mine, but I'll talk a lot. Want to go back up?
Switching it?
Sure.
I need the microphone.
I know.
There.
I'm just going to hold it. Maybe.
All right, maybe walk all the way over there. Thank you, dear.
Here you go.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll shout out when necessary.
Just correct me when I'm wrong. Again, Jon described exactly what we did. So we found at ACS when we got started that we had the disparate data all over the place, that we had the fiefdoms that we talked about, different people wanting to be controlling different data and so forth, and that we were doing these huge one-off surveys once a year on membership and certain behaviors and so forth, and of course, you do it once, and then 11 months later, you're still using a survey that's 11 months old, and things have changed and so forth. And then on top of that, we were asking people the same questions over and over and over again because we had no central repository for keeping them. And so what we did 2 things. One is what we call the modular survey, and the other was the data warehouse. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip and talk about the modular survey first, because what happens in it, it's happened to everyone in here, you're you have standard information that you want to have on your members and so forth, and then someone somewhere in leadership says, oh, well, we need to know whether they like, insert whatever you want, or whatever thing or whatever political thing is going on, you have a new president, what does that mean, kinds of things. And so you want to be able to associate people's standard sort of beliefs, attitudes, and wants with those things that are current at the moment or meaningful for the moment. And so in our case, what we did was that we call it a modular survey because we have a portion of the survey that we just swap out each time we do it with new categories to put in it. So one time it's extra details about the brand above and beyond the Net Promoter Score. Another time we just finished one, for example, on women in the workplace and the problems they encounter and so forth in the workplace. And then we'll pull that one out and we'll do another one with just millennials and so forth. So we get these kind of extra goodies that we put in, but the survey is always going. So we can go back to leadership and say, well, here's the Net Promoter Score. Does anyone not know what a Net Promoter Score is? I'm happy to tell you. It's the score where people talk about willingness to recommend, renew, and how long their tenure is and so forth. And you put that together, and it's how many you say they will, top box or top two box, and subtract it from those at the other end. You get a Net Promoter Score. So, for example, if you talk about health insurance companies, they always score deep into the negative integers in that. I forgot, one of the insurance companies is a negative 55, which is the lowest anyone's ever been. I forgot who it is. And then, but you want, let's face it, you want to be in a positive, high positive integers for that kind of thing. And then, I'm sorry you asked me about that, and I got sidetracked. Sorry. Anyway, so doing that so you can make associations between the modules you put in there and changes or the current Net Promoter Scores or other evaluations on the brand and attitudes at the same time.
So I'll make a quick example why that matters. So the Women in the Workplace study. Not only do we learn about the problems that exist for women in the workplace, but you can also look at that and correlate it to what they feel about ACS. Not surprisingly, if somebody is not happy in the workplace, sometimes it filters to their association. And so you can demonstrate this is not just a problem that exists for women, but it's actually affecting our association because you can match that information with the information that now exists, and you can take and say, hey, we've got a problem here that we need to address. Whereas in the old days, all you do is say, hey, there's this problem, we should do something about it. But you don't necessarily know what it means for us.
Right.
And now you do.
Right. And on top of that, it gives you an avenue for your advocacy if that's what your association does. So the American Chemical Society has an advocacy component to it. And so this makes a direct connection between what's going on in the real world with the association and what you're trying to influence. And it's driven by numbers. So if you make changes in your advocacy and so forth, you should be able to see that over time in the measures themselves. Data warehouse build, I'm not, in part because I just don't know the details of it. John may remember more of it than I do, but the idea was that this was really important. The way data works at ACS right now, and I'm sure it's common across many of you, is that the data collection methodologies were developed years ago, and they've just been, I'll say, jerry-rigging them all along and keeping up. And we just realized we just couldn't use that anymore. And so what we did was we developed our own sort of in-house data warehouse. And what we've done is that we take downloads from the main information service that we have, our NetForum data, and match that up to the existing data that we already have. So we keep a data warehouse ourselves in our research and product development department rather than going back to the main data collection. That isn't optimal, but that's just the way that we've done it right now because we are so siloed for that kind of stuff.
And they are unique. Most the other organizations we work with, it's all together. It's not unique to build sort of their database.
Right. And so John showed it. This exactly the way we did it was that we went, begin with the data integration, and then we supplement the existing data with survey information. And in about 20% of our cases, that was the predominance of data because all we had from members were basically name and email address, not even gender, where they work, and so forth. And then, of course, you guys know this, if someone's been a member for a while, they don't call you up once a year and go, hey, guess what, I've changed jobs or got a new degree or something. They give it to you. And say, what do you mean I'm still a student? I'm 50, that kind of stuff. So you can deal with it. Develop the ability to visualize the data. I can't tell you how meaningful that is for senior leadership. we were in a presentation yesterday, someone was talking, and I'm gonna butcher it and so forth, but basically, well, we're dealing with scientists, so they're used to seeing data all the time, so all you have to do is show them the data, and it's, that's just not the case, because they're only used to seeing data in their particular environment, and I assure you that psychometric data, which is what this is very different than the other data they're doing. I could stand here and talk about the difference between recursive and non-recursive models if you want to go to sleep now, or we could talk about other things, but it's very different, so the understanding they have is very limited. That being the case, it doesn't mean they're not smart people, it's just that they're not used to looking at the data. If you can visualize the data in Tableau or something like that to show people real meaningful shifts in information and data and put it next to each other, it is extraordinarily powerful because then they see it right in front of them and they can interpret it. It's not doing some, it's crosstabs of what we used to do all the time ago. You look on page 36 and go back over to page 205, you'll see that you can't do that. But if it's one sheet of paper and you go, hey, look at this, and it'll jump right out of it. It's very, very impressive. So, and then it also is our ability to run complex data analytics. So let me ask everyone a question in here. At your associations, do you have things what I call association lore, where people say, oh, our members do X, and we've known that for years. And you get that all the time. They just do that. We know that's the case. It's just all the time. And then after a while, you're going, really? They do that? Who says that? Kind of stuff. And so we had instances like that at ACS. And so, it doesn't matter when people join. You just want them to get them in because once they start getting printed copies of our CNE News magazine, we know they stay forever. Really? Is that what it is? So we went back and analyzed. So the first thing we found was that between 2/3 and 3/4 of all members at ACS start off as students. So, attracting students is important if everyone starts off that way. And then what was this stuff about getting a printed magazine and that means that you're going to stay at ACS forever? I don't get that. So we went and looked at that. And guess what? Yeah, everyone who is over 50 got CNE News in a printed format. Well, I'm over 50, I like printed stuff, but that's because I'm over 50 and used to reading printed stuff. It has nothing to do with when we looked at young people and they got printed stuff, they don't want nothing, so they wanted digital. So that means that printed stuff meant nothing. So that was the whole lore. It's like, well, so what if they're reading? They're just older people and that's the way they do things. It has nothing to do with longevity or anything of the sort, but that's the story that got told all along. So here are the tools. John, do you want to talk about the tools since you know them specifically?
Yeah, but I'm afraid I put people to sleep.
Well,
Sorry, go on. I'll take it. So, and all this stuff, just I've had to learn in the last five or 6 years. I'm a trained survey researcher, but essentially the key components here are developing a cloud environment where everything can exist. We use Microsoft Azure. It's not the only thing that you can use. A lot of people use Amazon Web Services. The key thing sort of to make everything work and begin to talk together is you have to learn how to script, and oftentimes you do that in Python. Another thing that I've had to learn recently is R. I grew up in SAS, and then I learned SPSS in the corporate environment. There's not a single person under the age of 30 that uses that. They all use stuff in R. So if you want to, and oftentimes if you're hiring for this, they're going to want to use R. So you got to sort of go to the people that you're hiring.
Are there people in here who don't know what SAS and R before we go on? Is anyone feeling lost?
They're statistical packages. So SAS was the gold standard, then it was SPSS for a little while, and now it's R. It's the shorthand version of it. So these things are absolutely critical to be able to sort of wrangle the information and to begin to analyze it. Then there's a matter of sort of pushing out the data and doing the visualization that John talked about. Again, this is absolutely critical because oftentimes we're doing this for a year and the executives go, hey, we haven't seen anything. And you go, actually, we're just about there. The two platforms that we tend to use are Tableau or Power BI. Again, we have a slight preference for Tableau. Power BI, though, is something that Microsoft has invested a lot in. I think it's going to be a very good program in a couple of years. But all of these things will allow us to build the infrastructure that we need to do the kinds of things that John and I have talked about. And again, the key way to think about this is sort of, in the old days, you got the data and you did nothing with it. Then eventually you got the data, maybe move it into a database. Now the entire thing needs to be talking to each other back and forth at all times. Right? You have to develop a system that allows you to do that. Again, that will then allow you to do all the information and the types of surveys and the types of analysis that John and I have talked about. So, and if people want to spend more time on that stuff, after this, I'm happy to talk about the actual details.
So this is just almost redundant for what we talked
Yeah,
about.
this week, and next week, I think we got. So this is something we threw in there because we wanted to. It actually is not. So we wanted to show some information of that says, hey, this is all this really cool information. Here's the analysis that we've done, and everything is so proprietary that we had to yank it out. And we, John would have gotten in trouble, I would have gotten in trouble. So we decided to show something else we've done. Actually, we do some work with Avila. Anybody in here from Avila? And we've done some stuff around sort of data and integration, looking at associations with them. And this is one of my favorite slides, and so we just went ahead and threw it in there. Basically, it takes a look at what association members think are important versus people who actually work inside of associations. So the line are the pros, the blue fill-in are the members themselves. And where is the biggest gap, and where are the problems? The biggest gap is around job opportunities. The professionals think that you all are doing a great job on this stuff, and the people who are actually members of the associations, much less likely to say, yeah, you're doing a good job. That gap is about 12 or 14 points. You take a look at that versus with millennials, and it gets up to about a 25-point difference. You want to figure out how to sort of talk to millennials. This is right. This is some of the key stuff. On the flip side, and as much as I love going to conferences just like this, things like networking, socializing, raising, those types of things, those social interactions, much more likely for people who are professionals to think are important than actual members themselves. And again, there's an even larger gap when you look at that by millennials. For them, it's even lower than the score that you see here. So I think I think we need to let Catherine talk because we're getting. I think we're running out of time. Let's just go to the next one. Questions for the two of us before we move to the next section?